Hello, I'm John Reisman, and this is Centrist News and Perspectives, where we try to get closer to the truth using evidence, reason, and logic. What we know right now, Trump still has not shown us the tax returns he promised. Mexico has still not paid for the wall. Of course, Trump's trying to get that money from our military, which was already designated for other missions. So the big news this week is Ukraine. And what's going on here, it looks like Donald Trump was trying to use the military money that was supposed to support Ukraine to influence whether or not they would investigate Joe Biden to influence the 2020 elections. Now, Donald Trump tried to keep this information from the public, even though according to the whistleblower, the CIA agent, there was actually no national security information in the phone call itself. The information was put up to a higher level code word clearance system inside the executive branch, and basically those types of systems are supposedly used for spy operations. Now, why would Donald Trump do this, and why has he done it on past phone calls? Of course, he says it was because of leaks. Well, that's understandable. The problem is, if there's nothing wrong in the phone call, why is it confidential? In fact, in the Obama administration, I remember most of the phone calls always put out a summary after the phone calls from the government saying, here's what was said, here's what was agreed to. Didn't give all the details, but at least you got a summary. Donald's pretty much hiding what he's doing and what he's saying. And now we have Vladimir Putin coming out and saying, hey, make sure my phone calls with you don't come out. Now that should worry us, because we already know that Donald Trump is quite apparently under foreign influence from multiple leaders around the world. By actually interacting with the president of Ukraine in the manner he did, he shows that he's also allowing Ukraine to influence decisions that affect national security in America.
Your campaign this time around, if foreigners, if Russia, if China, if someone else offers you information on an opponent, should they accept it or should they call the FBI?
I think maybe you do both. I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening.
Do you want that kind of interference in our elections?
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI, if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
My view is that if any public official or member of any campaign is contacted by any nation state or anybody acting on behalf of a nation state about influencing or interfering with our election, then that's something that the FBI would want to know about.
This is problematic. It is in fact illegal to ask a foreign leader to interfere in an election. Trump says he didn't do that directly, but through the actions of Rudy Giuliani and multiple individuals involved in the Trump campaign and in the Trump White House, we can see that that is in fact what most likely happened. Now we can't say for sure, because 100% is a hard thing to achieve these days. And what the Centrist News does is we focus on what is indicated by the information available. So we have to, of course, keep track of this story and see how it develops. The Democrats are now pushing more strongly for impeachment. And that's probably not a bad thing, because if you go for impeachment, what can happen is at least we get to see more things. We get to have more things investigated. Donald Trump will, of course, say that is a witch hunt. And what's interesting about it, like the Mueller Report, the witch hunt caught a lot of witches in the Mueller investigation, so it may very well catch more witches during the Trump investigation. In financial news, Donald Trump is now threatening to actually delist companies from the stock exchange from China. Most investment professionals are warning that this would be extraordinarily dangerous and disastrous for economic reasons, because we have basically a global trading system. But causing that level of chaos could be much more impactful than Donald Trump might think. It could be actually dangerous to his 2020 election, But he probably doesn't know that because he doesn't really understand economics very well. One thing that's interesting about the trade war, though, is when Donald Trump started with his presidency, the trade imbalance, I think, was around $45 billion. Since he's been president for 2.5 years now, plus, it's now up to $55 billion. So actually, he's not performing extraordinarily well. He did, of course, say he would perform well because he's got the best, biggest brain, and it doesn't seem that that is the case based on the evidence we can see. There's an interesting piece in The Atlantic that actually is talking about sovereignty. Now, actually, sovereignty is fairly important for a nation to protect its own democracy. But there are two types of sovereignty. One is internal and one is external. And what Trump is doing is a little bit odd because most of his ideas of sovereignty are centered around protecting himself, not America. Now, that's somewhat problematic because the president's job, based on his oath of office, is in fact to protect America. And Donald Trump's failed on that multiple times during his presidency. But he keeps saying, the rhetoric, of course, that he is protecting America and he loves America. I don't know how many times he's actually hugged a flag, but it's pretty much all show with Donald. And that's the way it was on The Apprentice as well. Just a reminder on The Apprentice, that was probably one of the very few successful stories Donald had in business. He had 6 major bankruptcies. You could make it 7 actually if you include Trump University. Now, the fact that we still haven't seen his tax returns, so we still don't know exactly how much he's worth, and what the presidency has done for his profits, so to speak, regarding, of course, the emoluments clause. We do know, however, that Donald Trump has lied many times about how much he's worth, and that's very interesting as well. In fact, he started his career by lying to get on the Forbes 500 list and valued himself at around $100 million. In fact, he was maybe worth around $5 million at the time. That was in 1982, and he artificially inflated his value by nearly 2,000%. 19 times more than his claim, which, when you do a relative analysis, he was only worth 5% of what he was saying he was worth. That's a pretty darn big lie. So if you think about it, if his lies are 2,000% larger than his reality, let's apply that to his phone call with the Ukrainian president. Let's say this is normal for Trump. His lies are around 2,000% larger than his reality. His perfect phone call is most likely less than perfect because there's no reason for him to hide it from the public if it didn't have anything wrong with it. And that's what we need to pay attention to. So let's get a little bit deeper into the idea of external versus internal sovereignty. Now, in external sovereignty, what you're talking about is protecting your nation. In internal sovereignty, you're talking about yourself as a sovereign if you're the president, Donald Trump. And you're saying, I'm protecting my personal sovereignty. Now, how does he do that? Well, with external sovereignty, he's actually embracing what dictators are saying and not listening to the intelligence community and what it advises regarding the information collected that it is aware of. So Donald Trump trusts, for example, more than our own intelligence company, the United States. He trusts Vladimir Putin. He trusts Mohammed bin Salman. He trusts Duterte. He trusts dictators instead of the U.S. intelligence community, which means he is not protecting the nation. He's actually favoring himself for some reason. And the sum is a big question mark. Might have to do with influences regarding trademarks for the Trump organization, for his family, business deals, the external nations putting money into his hotels and golf courses. Of course, now he's getting the U.S. government to actually make contracts with his hotels and golf courses, sending military people, for example, to Scotland. Even Vice President Mike Pence went to his Scotland resort. These are all problems regarding the emoluments clause, and of course it indicates Trump is breaking the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So those are pretty important issues. But let's get back to that internal issue. If Donald Trump is not listening to the intelligence community, then what he is in fact doing is ignoring the community that is supposed to police the United States, to make sure that we are protecting ourselves from enemies, foreign and domestic. And that domestic threat can even come from the President of the United States, in this case, Donald Trump. So when a whistleblower goes forward and says, hey, we have foreign election influence being promoted by the President of the United States, and remember, there were multiple calls involved with the CIA officer's report regarding the whistleblower complaint. So we still have to hear what the other calls were happening, what was happening on those calls, and we have to let the intelligence community work that out, as well as the Intelligence Committee. So if Donald Trump's not listening to the U.S. intelligence community, who is he listening to?
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia.
Well, we know he's under foreign influence. That's clearly implicated in most of his dealings and the way he speaks regarding foreign leaders. He's hiding, of course, all of the foreign leaders' conversations now at high-level clearance inside the computers of the intelligence community and saying those can't be released without some sort of vetting process. So actually, it's pretty important now, I think, that the impeachment process gets started, because it at least opens up the investigative process so we can start looking at these things more carefully. We need to know how much of a threat this is. We do know Donald has openly invited other countries to interfere in our elections. He did it during his 2016 campaign. He did it again, and Giuliani did it, saying, hey, it's okay to listen to foreign information or foreign leaders giving information to Donald Trump to figure out what's going on with his opponents. Well, that's actually illegal. It was illegal before, it's illegal now. The problem is we have Attorney General Barr, who is now Donald Trump's personal attorney. That's a hard one to say. The Attorney General of the United States, designed by position to protect the people of America and to protect America, is now working as a personal attorney for the President of the United States. That's not good either. We've got a lot of issues here, so we have to pay very careful attention and stop thinking everything's okay, because something's quite wrong. And as I said back in 2016, it is quite likely that what Donald is doing will do enough damage to America to lower our prestige in the world. It already has. And by the way, remember, Donald said they're not going to laugh at us anymore. Well, guess what?
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true.
They are laughing all around the world because Donald is president. Because essentially everyone knows he's a joke. And that's a problem, because we were the leader of the free world. It doesn't seem that that is true anymore, because we're embracing dictators all around the world, from the executive office, the White House, and that's Donald Trump. In further information regarding the Ukrainian call, there's an interesting AP fact check that we should take a look at. Trump says, I want to see other countries helping Ukraine also, not just us. As usual, the United States helps and nobody else is there. Well, that's not correct. As we can see, the European Union institutions have provided more development assistance than the US, $425 million in 2016 and 17, compared with $204 million from Washington. So this is really just rhetorical blabber coming from Donald Trump, trying to get people misled on what's really going on. And that's very normal. He does this all the time. It's also referred to as gaslighting. Trump also said in the July 25th conversation to Ukraine's leader, Germany does almost nothing for you. All they do is talk, according to the White House account of the conversation released on Wednesday. The facts: Germany is the third largest bilateral donor to Ukraine after the EU and the US. So again, misleading information from Mr. Trump, which is pretty gosh darn normal these days, isn't it? Nigel Farrage has gotten himself back in the news by vowing to take a knife to the pen pushers. Now, if you don't know who Nigel is, this is UK politics, but it's interesting because similar to the 2016 election, Russia was also clearly indicated in influencing the move towards Brexit and encouraging everyone to go for the Brexit because they wanted to destabilize the European Union. Russia likes to destabilize countries like the European Union and, of course, like America. Because if America is destable and the UK is destabilized and if the European Union is unstable, then what happens is Russia can get away with more things, moving its agenda towards probably trying to get Ukraine back and some of the other countries it lost when the Soviet Union broke up. And that seems to be Vladimir Putin's goal, which actually brings us towards the investigations from the Mueller Report and Paul Manafort and Donald's tax returns. And so I wanted to bring this up because we still haven't seen the tax returns, any of them. Donald could have released tax returns from before this tax returns audit, and his tax return seems to be in audit for a long time. Of course, now he has someone working at the IRS that he appointed, so as far as we know, that tax return will be in audit for virtually as long as Donald Trump is president. But here's the thing. Paul Manafort was working in Ukraine. He ended up on Trump's campaign, and he got busted in the Mueller investigation. So the thing about this is we need to know Donald Trump's tax returns all the way back to before the Ukrainian deal, because we need to know if Donald was also involved in Russia trying to take over Ukraine in some way, fashion, or form. In other words, doing land deals, real estate deals, being associated with people pushing this agenda. So there's a lot of information there we need to pay attention to. We started out talking about Farrage, and the reason was that Farrage is connected to Assange, Assange is connected to Putin, Putin's connected to Brexit, and of course the 2016 hack. And there are a lot of connections between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin. So we have to continue to get closer to the truth and investigate these things further, but we also have to pay attention to the evidence that's right before our eyes, because it clearly looks like Donald has been engaged with these folks for a long time. Let's not forget all of Donald Trump's convictions in the past with Trump Organization, where he was involved in money laundering and tax evasion, and he was busted for those, and he of course had to pay fines for those from Trump Organization. He says he settled those deals. Those weren't deals to be settled. He was found guilty through Trump Organization, and they had to pay the fines. Then of course he argued about the fines forever and ever, and eventually they came to amounts that they had to pay. Let's talk about healthcare for a minute, and especially regarding smoking. Of course, cigarette smoking has been demonstrated to cause cancer not only firsthand, but also with secondhand smoke. And also studies have shown that third-hand smoke, in other words, the residue from cigarettes that gets on walls, couches, and whatever, can also cause damage to human bodies and infants. But vaping, this is a new thing. This has only been around for 10 years or so. It's now on the market, and it's gotten quite big quite fast. In the old days, cigarette smoking really, they said, all right, you've got a 1 in 4 chance of dying from smoking from cigarettes. And it would take usually decades for that to occur. Not a good way to die, because the number of diseases and disorders that are associated with smoking are quite extraordinary and dramatically increase healthcare costs. But vaping is new and interesting because it introduces different types of toxins and heavy metals into the body. We don't know all the impacts of that, but we already know that we've reduced the time span from decades and dying from cigarette smoking to months or even a few years by vaping. So vaping is a very efficient mechanism to kill you if you're interested in going that way. Now, I don't recommend it, of course. I think it's unhealthy. But people think it's cool, so they do it anyway. But the reality is, when you're smoking cigarettes or vaping, you're doing a couple of interesting things. You're killing yourself and making other people rich. And that's basically it. You get to make them rich so they can have bigger salaries. They can buy more cars and islands and whatever they want to buy, the executives at the tobacco companies. And you get to die, usually in a very unpleasant way. So if you're smoking, you might want to think about that more carefully. I understand it's very addictive. I used to smoke as well. And it's not good at all. It hurt me a lot, and I hope it doesn't hurt you because I hope you quit. But quit sooner than later, because the longer you smoke, the more dangerous it gets. I'm John Reisman, and this is Centrist News and Perspectives.